So besides the normal list prep work that we discussed in Module 6, things like removing duplicates, cleaning the list, that kind of stuff, we've got some extra special steps here that we need to take. And I'm laughing because, it looks like we're going to be doing a lot of work, but really, we're not. Once you know what to do and you know how to do a few simple tasks, this actually can go pretty quickly. So after you do it a few times, don't get discouraged the first time you see this through, the first time you try it. But it's one of those things where you do it and then it kind of clicks, okay? When we're working on a campaign like this, starting from scratch where we've converted some sales copy to a postcard and now we're going to actually start processing it, we will actually build a new temporary list. And you'll see why. You want to be working and manipulating the data, but you don't want to do that to your main list just in case you mess something up. So you'll see why all that makes sense here shortly. But for data-driven graphics, there are specific requirements that you have to adhere to. There's planning that you've got to take into consideration. The first time I did this, literally, I was, having to go back and forth between my postcard and my list, adding, modifying, importing, changing things. And eventually it clicked, okay? But you are going to get to circumvent a lot of that because I'm going to explain as much as possible. You can go out and try to find tutorials on variable data in Photoshop, and they're not going to connect all the pieces, okay? Trust me, because it took me hours of going through this stuff before I was able to develop a process that really seem to get some results, okay? So I'm going to be trying to introduce you to, things that I ran into along the way so that you'll have a little bit better understanding. The spreadsheet that you see here, I have actually built. I started out using just the name, gender, and the address information from our brokers list. Everything else, the date image, the headline, the CTA, the first and the fourth bullets, all of those had to be created. Don't worry though. Like I said, most of it happens automatically with some formulas that I'm going to show you. Those of you that know how to use Excel, you don't actually have to go into each record and type everything manually, right? You can use formulas and functions to do it for you. So let's start out with some of the rules. You may recall, let's switch back to our main list here. You may recall that our main list had a whole lot of column headers. Okay, those are field names, first name, last name, suffix, gender. But we've also got, if we scrolled over here, we've also got stuff like a home value description, income description, county name, marital status. Well, our first rule is this. Any column headers, any field names that appear in the list have to have a corresponding layer in your postcard or your envelope. What that means is that you want your list that you're going to import into Photoshop to have only the field header or columns that you're actually going to be using. One quick and easy way to handle that is to remove existing columns that you won't be needing. So to make sure that you don't lose any data, you're first going to make a copy of your list. Now, word of caution here. You're about to make a copy of your list. Okay, and I told you before, you only want to have one working copy of your list. So understand, you're making a copy to process and work and refine. So you want to make sure that any processing that you're going to do to the main list, as far as sorting it as well, okay, make sure that you have already completed that. So you're just making a copy to work on the copy so you don't mess up the original. And I hope that makes sense to you, okay? Right-click on this bottom tab down here in Excel and select Move or Copy. Now we're going to click Create a Copy and click OK. I've got a new tab down here. It's got the exact same name as the first one, except it's got a 2 in parenthesis, okay? That lets me know this is the copy. So right-click on that go to rename, and I'm just going to call this postcard and hit enter. So this is one file for those of you that are not real familiar with Excel. This is one file. It's called Match Dating XLSX, but it has two worksheets in it that right now are identical. Can't tell the difference. Now, very careful thought needs to go into what comes next. Your postcard template needs to already be created so you know exactly what variable data you're going to be using. We're going to need the first name here. For our address on the back card, we can use the full name, actually. And then we also need the last name because we're going to have to tack them together for this Pearl. And of course, we're going to need the address. If you're doing, just envelopes, by the way, maybe that's all you need. Full name, address, city, state, and zip, and that's it. But if you're going to use different versions of headlines or bullets or the Pearls or promo codes, endless possibilities here. So just think it through so that when you have when you design your postcards or you have them designed, you know exactly which of those fields you're going to be using. And again, you'll probably go back and forth a few times, so don't worry about this. That's why you're working with a copy in case you screw something up. It's okay. So, don't be surprised. You might have to come back to Excel, do some tweaking, export the file, go back to Photoshop, do it all over again, see if it works this time. It just happens, okay? You'll get it. Don't worry. In our case here, I'm changing elements based on gender, okay? So I need to have that gender field as an example. I don't even know where it's at here. Oh, that's because I'm not scrolled up enough. All right, there's gender. These first few fields, though, A, B, and C here, Lexnum, key code, and source data. I don't need those at all. I know I don't need them. So making sure I'm in my copy, I'm going to click and drag those columns, right click, and delete. That gets rid of them. Okay, I don't need the prefix. Right click, delete. I don't need the middle name. Right click and delete. Don't need the suffix. I do want gender. I do want address. I do want city, state. Now, I only need the 5-digit version of the zip code. So I'm going to get rid of these others. Let's just see what we've got here. So I don't need this one. And I don't need this one. I don't need any of these. Let's see what else we've got. Some of these headers, if you can't tell what is in there, you can either click and drag the header or double click on the divider there and it will kind of expand it to the minimum size that it needs to be. Notice I do have date of birth year. Okay, so I could use that, for example, in criteria to narrow my target audience even further. Maybe I wanted to have a picture that is, someone who is approximately their age. So I can have several different versions. I can have a younger woman and an older woman. I can have a younger man and an older man. So lots of possibilities, right? Obviously, I'm not going to teach you everything about using Excel, but keep stuff like this in mind. You can do some really amazing, cool things with your data inside of Excel. So in this case, though, we're going to go ahead and highlight all of this and delete. So that leaves us with full name, first name, last name, gender, and their address information. So let's look at our example file here. I want to point out a few things. Notice there are some columns here that I have added. Date, image, headline, bullet 1, bullet 4. This is an example of where you have to do a little bit of planning, okay? This is a very powerful technique, but it does require planning and design. The headline varies between two versions. One is for if the recipient is a male. The other is for if the recipient is a female. The good news is you don't have to do that for the hundreds or even thousands of records that you might have. You can get Excel to do it for you. So let's go back to our newly created file. I'm going to do a little bit of house cleaning here so I can fit things a little better. In the very next available column, I'm going to put headline here and then hit enter. The top cell of every column, that is your header. So that's what's going to tell Photoshop everything in that column is a headline, okay? Because that's what we have specified here. So we hit enter. The selector goes down to the next row right below the headline. Now comes the cool part. Excel uses functions and formulas to manipulate data. And I realize, guys, that some of you are very familiar with Excel. If you're a marketer, you probably should be. Okay, some of you are not, though, so I'm going to have to explain a little bit of this. One of the functions that we're going to be using here is the if function. And it works like this. If your tested scenario is true, take one action. And if it's not true, take another action. So if the tested scenario is true, do one thing. If it isn't true, do another thing. So we want to know, is the current record a female? And if they are, we want a specific headline to be used. If they aren't, though, we want a different headline. In Excel, to start a formula where you can use those functions, you start it with an equal sign. And our formula looks like this. Equal sign if, open parenthesis. Now notice Excel is prompting you for the parameters. So if you get stuck, guys, it's really cool. If you can remember the function name, Excel is going to prompt you through the information that it needs for that function. So next, it's wanting a logical test. And you can see that because logical test is bold in the little tooltip there. I'm going to reference the cell D2. And I'll just click on it. And that selects it. Okay, this is where the gender for that record shows up. And what I'm going to put is another equal sign and double quotes, the letter F for female, and double quotes again. And that's the test. Because if you look at the data here for gender, you can see it either says F or M, female or male. So that's my logical test. If D2 equals F, the result of that test will be true. A logical test only has two outcomes, true or false. So we need to put a comma now to separate that. That's our test. We now want to say, here's what you do if that's true. And all you need to do is put the headline that you want for female recipients, but enclose it in double quotes. 2 divorced women who want to find love. And again, double quotes. Next is another comma. And that's how we're separating the parameters for this function. But now we're going to put what we want done if that logical test is false. If it's not an F, it's obviously going to be an M, okay? So we don't have to test for that. We're going to put double quote and say 2 divorced men who want to find love, and close it in double quotes. And then because we started with an opening parenthesis, we're going to use a closing parenthesis, and that puts that all together nice and neat. Now, when you hit enter, what you're going to get is one of these two headlines is going to appear in that cell. And you can see right now what shows up there is 2 divorced women who want to find love. And if we go back on that same record, we can see that, in fact, this is a female. So that worked, right? But here's the cool thing. What is in that cell is not really that value. If I click on the cell, you can see up here in the formula bar, this formula is actually what is in that cell. All it is showing you, though, is the result of that formula. So Excel needs to put some data here, right? Because you put a formula there. First thing it does is it says, oh, this is the if function. Got this. I need a logical test. It performs that logical test. Does D2 equal F? Oh, yes, it does. So if it does, do this. And that's what you see there. That's the result. That formula is getting run, and what you're seeing in the spreadsheet is the result of the formula. Now listen carefully. A standard Excel file will keep these formulas so that you can actually use them and tweak them, and you can manipulate the data and it will update automatically. It's very cool. Even after you save the file, it still keeps doing it. When you export a text or a CSV file, which is what we're going to have to do to bring it into Photoshop, those formulas actually disappear in the exported file. What you're left with is only the data that is being displayed. So when I save this file, when I export it for Photoshop, whatever text is in this cell, that's the actual text that's going to go. It will not leave that whole formula in there. So keep that in mind, and that's another reason to work off of a copy like this and keep the file in Excel, because this way you can keep those formulas and you just do an export to get your data. But now we need this whole, look at all these, let's see how many records I've got in this particular file. I've got 3,889 records. Man, I don't want to type that formula in all of those. Well, guess what? You don't have to. Click on the first cell, the one that has the formula that we just created, and then you can scroll all the way down to the bottom of your list, hold the Shift key down, and click the last record in the same column. You have to make sure you've selected, the same column. And it does not matter if you've got thousands of records to do this. It'll work. Okay, on the Home tab, locate the editing group, then select Fill and Down, and watch this. Boom. Let's go back up to the top. So as you can see here, some of these now say to divorced men. So this one says men. Let's look over here. Lo and behold, that is an M for male. So that's the headline that's going to be used for that particular recipient. So it's got a custom headline depending on whether the recipient is a male or a female. Let's look at another example. We're going to switch back to this file for a sec. Our next custom data is going to be this call to action, the PURL. This is a personalized URL. Notice that it is built by adding a domain name, a slash, and the recipient's first and last name. Excel is going to do that for us, and we're going to use a function called concatenate. And that simply glues one piece of text to another. Again, this is where planning comes in. So we're going to go to the next column, type CTA, hit enter. So in this case, I have kept the first and last name, even though I also have the full name, okay? But I need to have them separated so that I can do what you saw there, have the first name, a period, and their last name. Now you'll notice the data here also, the first letter of the first name and last name is capitalized, but in my example here, notice it is not. All of these are all lowercase and consistent. So to get that, we're also going to use another function besides concatenate. We're going to use a function called lower that will take any text that we give it and it'll make it lowercase. And that, again, just for consistency's sake. So check it out. Very next column, CTA. And let me actually stretch this out so that it doesn't look like we're going over top of everything. That's better. So concatenate is real simple. You just want to tell it each individual element that you want connected, okay? Enclose any text in double quotes. Use a comma to separate any of the parameters, okay? So it works like this. Again, we start with an equal sign because that's how all Excel formulas start. Type concatenate, and it doesn't actually have to be uppercase, but I do that just for programming consistency. Opening parentheses, and now we have text 1. What do we want to be the first piece of text? I'm going to put double quotes, not getting burned again.com. That's my website, and I'm going to do a / and double quotes. Okay, so that is the first element of text that I want concatenated. Then I do a comma. So now I'm working on the second element of text. And you can see Excel is prompting you. I mean, this is super simple, guys. Excel prompts you for what is next. Need another piece of text. All I have to do is click on, make sure you're in the exact same row, right? But all I have to do is click on the cell that contains the data that I want. I want the first name, so I click that, and that cell reference pops in right there. Okay, and then a comma, and now I want a period. Remember, I want first name, period, last name. Even though it's just a period, I have to put it in double quotes. And then another comma. And then I click on the last name. Okay, now we close all functions with a closing parenthesis, hit enter, and look what we get. NotGettingBurnedAgain.com / Catherine.Hegan. But Catherine and Hegan have that first letter capitalized. And this is where we're going to use the lower function. This technique is called a nested function. It means that there is a function inside of another function, and we're going to place this concatenate function inside the lower function. So what it'll do is it'll take the result of this concatenate function, just like you see here, and it'll pass that to the lower function, and then we'll get the result of that. It's pretty cool. So here's an easy way to do it. Again, this is what's showing up, but we know that the actual data that's in that cell is this formula here. Okay, so we want to send this concatenate function to our lower function. Right after the equal sign, we're going to type lower, opening parentheses, and then we just go to the very end and type a closing parenthesis. Hit enter, and now Catherine Hegan is all lowercase. So same thing as for the headlines. Start with the first one, go all the way to the bottom, and it doesn't matter if you have 100 million, 1,000 records. Shift click on the last one, go up to here, fill, down, and all of those instantly get built. How cool is that? In Excel, it's called relative referencing. If I were to go to each one of these records individually, what you'll see is, see how it says B4 and C4? When I go to the next one, it says B5 and C5. It knows that this needs to be incrementally done. So it's going, in this case, to the same row and going and grabbing the first name and last name and building that URL for us. So now we've got our pearls for every single recipient in the list. Pretty neat, right? Seriously, a lot of you guys probably know some basic Excel stuff, but even if you don't, just learn a few basic essentials. You do not have to learn all that Excel does. Learn a few basics in Excel and Photoshop, and this is like voodoo. So we've got 2 bullet points left. Let's switch over to here. Got a couple of bullet points, bullet point 1 and bullet point 4. Because in our design, remember here, we've got 2 bullet points that vary depending on if the recipient is male or female. Are we talking to a man or a woman? You could also use this technique to just, swap out headlines. Maybe you're doing split testing, swap out a call to action, anything. We're going to create the header. And in this case, we're going to just call it bullet 1. Hit enter. Again, let's expand this a little bit. And then we'll do bullet 2, or bullet 4, actually. Keep it consistent. Same rules as with the header. We're going to check to see, are they male or female, and give them the correct version of the copy. So equal sign, if, opening parentheses, and then our logical test. We're doing the exact same test, folks. Okay, just go to the gender, and then does that equal F? If it does equal F, if they are a female, double quote, committed, sensible men. Joke's on you, ladies. Okay, now that's what shows if it's true, if they are a female. If they're not a female, we want committed, sensible women, double quote, and closing parentheses. Now, I am not going to go down and do all of these records like I've been showing you. I'm going to show you a little trick in Excel. You can click on the formula, and you can click this little square, click and drag, and it'll fill down for you just what you have selected. Okay, so I didn't go all the way to the bottom with that one, but that's because we don't need that many records. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. So that is our bullet point number 1. Same thing for bullet 4. We've got our bullet 4 header. This one, though, is going to say either financially secure men or financially secure women. Okay, so equal sign, if, and guys, all Excel formulas start with that equal sign. If you get stuck, if you're having a problem with a formula not working, check to make sure that you have that equal sign there. That's a good place to start. It's a very common oversight. If, opening parenthesis, same test. So let's click on the gender cell. If that equals female, comma, I want you to say financially secure men, double quote, comma, and then what do we want if it is not? Financially secure women, dot, 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 double quote, closing parenthesis. Okay, and again, just for illustrative purposes, let's fill that down, and you can see it varies depending on their gender. Okay, now let's take a break. We've got 2 more fields of data that we're going to put in, but these fields are going to be a little bit different because they're going to contain some image information, for example. So if this is your first exposure to Excel, you might want to watch this video again. Okay, follow along on your computer if you can, because that is the best way to learn. Even if you don't have an actual list yourself, you know what kind of data is in here. Just make up some addresses, make up some names, just do a sample, working with your own hands and getting these kinds of results based on the testing that's going on here. That's going to help you go a long way into understanding how this is, how the whole thing is pulled off. So grab a drink, grab a snack, and when you're ready, we'll continue in the next video.